Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host.
This week, I went through a bunch of articles that I had saved, and there's kind of a nice privacy theme that's going to be a little bit of a focus in this show today. Privacy and security are related, not necessarily the same thing, but oftentimes a lot of security professionals are obviously concerned about privacy. And so the first topic, I actually came across this as I was browsing through my Apple News, and it was talking about how Apple Face ID works. And of course, you know, with Microsoft, Adam and I both work for Microsoft in our field sales for security. The opinions and everything that we talk about on the show are ours and don't reflect anything of our employer. But, with that, we are obviously very educated on how also Windows Hello for Business works. And so they work very similar. And the reason why this kind of piqued my interest was I still get questions from customers. Like just recently, I got a question from a fellow colleague who said, hey, I have this customer that wants to use Windows Hello for Business, but they're really concerned about storing biometric data, like the facial biometric data or fingerprints of their users. And they're really worried about the liability of that and getting sued for it, or like maybe in a data breach, that information might be, taken and then stolen. Right. And so they wanted to do all the sorts of stuff like rotate Windows Hello for Business, like basically wipe the data and then have them re-enroll every year, have them sign like waivers or like voluntary agreements that had to be renewed every year to say, hey, I agree to like this company storing my data, so on and so forth. And I was like, what is going on? Like there's a fundamental disconnect on how like these technologies work versus, like the risk of it getting out and being used. So just wanted to take a little bit of time. We have done this type of content before, but just as a refresher, because there are still people. I was actually talking to my friend who was working, she works for Google, and she sent something, blah, blah, blah. I put in my password and all this other stuff. I'm like, password? It is 2025 and people are still entering their passwords into their devices. Like, what are we doing? We should be passwordless by now. And I know that like Adam has teased this Blue Security Podcast, security maturity model that we've been wanting to do. It's just, there's just been other things to talk about. And so we are going to do that. But man, if you are not on the passwordless journey already and like using no passwords, like other than like, I get like devices like Apple, right? Like Mac OS, you do have, if you're using File Vault, you have to enter in a password to unlock the encryption on the disk, blah, blah, blah. But Windows, you should be using passwordless technology by now. So let's just go through and understand how this works, because if you're not using it and there's like some concern that like you're storing biometric data, you can use this part of the podcast as a pitch to your senior leadership and say, look, we should be doing this. There's no risk. Let's go ahead and do it. So
Andy, before you even get into it, I'm going to put on my computer history hat for 1 second because I love this stuff. You mentioned Face ID and Windows Hello are similar. And the reason they're similar is because they have the same ancestor in the technology family tree. So Microsoft licensed this technology, and I forget the name of the company. It doesn't matter. Apple went and bought the company is effectively the story. So Microsoft had licensed it for use in Windows Hello. Apple went and bought it, but that's why they are so similar in their implementation of infrared and everything you're about to talk through. So if you're curious, you're like, well, why are they so similar? Well, there's part of the reason. They have the common ancestor.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So the way that it works is you have to have an infrared camera, an IR camera, right? And so like that, there's a special, like if you're buying it for your computer, they say it's an IR camera. It's works with Windows Hello. Obviously for iPhones, it's built in automatically. And so this IR camera scans the contours of your face and it puts a bunch of IR dots on your face. Kind of like similar, I thought about like, when I watched filming like back behind the scenes of like Avatar, like those movies where they have actors and then more like Gollum, from like Lord of the Rings. There's like an actor in a suit, right? And then they have like these dots all over the face to capture the facial expressions. It's kind of like that, right? Like there's a bunch of infrared beams, dots that like map out your face. It's not taking a picture. It is
That's why it works in the dark, by the way. You can use Face ID on your iPhone in the dark. Clearly not taking a picture because you wouldn't get a good one.
Yeah, exactly. It is a 3D model. And so the software, once it kind of gets all those dots, it analyzes a lot of key facial features like the distance between your eyes, the shape of your nose, the contours of your chin, distances between your chin and your lips, so on and so forth. And all that data is then transformed into a unique mathematical representation of your face. It's a template. And that template is stored securely on your device. It's encrypted with Windows Hello for Business. It's specifically called an enrollment profile that's stored locally. It never leaves the device. It's encrypted using a randomly generated AES encryption and a SHA hash. Now, that's important because a hash, as you know, is one way. Or maybe you don't know this, but like a hash is a one-way encryption, right? You cannot reverse engineer a hash to get the original data. So even if somehow someone were to capture that data, that file, which does exist in the Windows system, it's really hard to get. I don't even know where it is on an Apple device.
Yeah, it's in the secure enclave on the iPhone.
Right.
Or on on any Apple Silicon device, I should say.
Right. And so like, even if you were to capture it, it cannot be reverse engineered to get, quote unquote, your biometric data, which isn't your biometric data anyways. It's just a mathematical representation of what the contours of your face look like. And so, and for Windows, only the Windows Hello for Business, like process has access to the file. Like you can't just like go and get the file. So nothing else in the operating system has access to the file. It's completely isolated. So what happens when you actually like scan your face? When you scan it, the IR camera activates, and like Adam said, since it's IR, it'll work in the dark too, and it kind of analyzes the depth map that was created, and it matches it to the template that it has on file. And using machine learning algorithm, it'll perform like a comparison between this, and it'll take into consideration like different lighting, facial expressions, minor changes like haircuts and stuff like that. And that's why, like for me, I'll scan my face with glasses and without glasses because that creates a different 3D model. And same thing with Windows Hello for Business. Like you can quote unquote improve the recognition if you have glasses, right? So, and if that comparison score exceeds a predefined threshold, then you'll get authenticated. You'll get access to the operating system. There is a carefully balanced threshold because if it's too low, then of course the system could be easily fooled. And if it's too high, then it's going to be very difficult to get your face to be recognized. When it comes to spoofing, because it is a 3D model, you can't just put a photo up. That will not work because a photo is 2D. And so
there's no depth.
There's no depth, right? And so there's no way to do that. Even if you put on a mask or something like that, it's not like it can't be fooled, but it's very difficult. And both Apple and Microsoft, they do a lot of training of that algorithm, that machine learning algorithm, to make sure that it cannot be fooled. And so it's just extremely difficult to be duped. Like in Apple, you can go into the settings and make sure that it's, your eyes have to be open so they can't just like scan your face when you're sleeping or something like that. And so like when it comes to the facial portion of it, that's just one method of biometric, right? There's a lot of other biometrics that are happening today. Fingerprints have been around for a long time. Voice recognition is another method of biometrics. Retinal scan, obviously, but that's pretty expensive and it's not something that like most consumers are going to have on their regular devices. But when it comes to comparing them, facial recognition, the Face ID, the Windows Hello for Business is actually one of the more secure ones compared to like fingerprints and voice recognition. Voice recognition today, I wouldn't
basically
even
defeated.
Yeah, I wouldn't even trust that with AI.
Yeah.
I mean, with the amount of content that Adam and I have out there, they can take a 10-second clip of our podcast and basically spoof our voice for pretty much anything, which is scary. I mean, it's definitely scary. I know that like Adam played around with the software just built into the platform of Riverside, which we use, and you can feed it like anything, and it'll like
I had it
have
read the Here's to the Crazy Ones from the Apple ad in the late 90s. Here's to the Crazy Ones, the Misfits, the Rebels, the Troublemakers, and had Andy read it. It was great.
yeah. I think you had me read like the
The preamble to the Constitution and all that.
And it's crazy how good it is. It's scary. And so voice recognition, not even secure. Fingerprints, they are considered pretty secure, but they are spoofable with like artificial fingerprints. There's more chances of errors. Like according to Apple, Face ID has a 1 in a million probability of being fooled, where like Touch ID has a 1 in 50,000 chance of accepting the wrong fingerprint. So quite a bit of difference between facial ID or Face ID and the fingerprint. So,
which is also kind of unusual from Apple to kind of crap on technology they still ship today. They still do Touch ID. I have a most recent current model iPad Air sitting next to me to my left, and it's a Touch ID is how you access it. So it's not like it's problematic. It's just that Face ID is an order of magnitude better. So that's interesting too. I mean, you can point out like, hey, this is better, but this is still good and good enough for almost anyone's purpose.
Yeah,
especially
for most people.
You know, all these have rate limiting built in too, right? They won't allow unlimited attempts.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and also like obviously if you have like an identical twin or something like that, right? Like the Face ID will be more susceptible to being fooled because obviously your facial features are going to be very similar. So there's obviously a higher chance there, but for the most part, it's very, very secure. So anyways,
well,
I wanted to go through that.
How the voice recognition has basically been defeated by AI today. Whenever we get those Mission Impossible masks from the Mission Impossible movies, then Face ID may be defeated too, but thankfully we've got some time yet. So
that, I mean, there are some pretty good 3D masks that today, but I mean, it's not stuff that's just available, and that would be a very targeted attack, right? It's like they'd have to make a specific face for you and then get your device as well. So I think it's just not feasible.
Absolutely. And then the other thing to point out, just as we were going through our discussion, while Apple's Face ID implementation does work in the dark, the Windows Hello and Windows Hello for Business implementation does require the standard 2D camera to be able to see you as well. So there's some nuance to implementation. You cannot unlock Windows Hello in the dark. It won't work. However, oftentimes the display from your PC is bright enough to illuminate your face that it'll help you sign in anyways, and that'll be sufficient. I've done it in a dark room with just the light from my PC monitor, but theoretically you cannot do it in a pitch black room without your face illuminated. That's one nuance of the difference in implementation.
And one final note, because I know that like whenever I talk to customers, there's always this, oh, we don't want to implement Windows Hello for Business because we don't have cameras that are built into our laptops. We don't want to buy cameras. We don't have fingerprint readers. There's always the PIN, right? Just like with your phone, if your Face ID doesn't work, then you have to enter in your PIN. The PIN is always required for Windows Hello for Business enrollment. It's your backup. And the reason why a PIN is still good is because the PIN is also local to the device. It's still considered, quote unquote, multi-factor because it's something that you know, and then also something that you have. So you have to have the physical device. Like if I knew Adam's PIN for his phone, he could tell it to me right now. It doesn't do me any good because I don't have his phone. And if he gets a new phone, he technically could change his PIN for that. He could have two phones with two different PINs, right? So it's always local to that phone. Even though, obviously human behavior, we always pretty much set the same PIN when we get a new device. But the PIN just doesn't have the same risk profile as like a password does, right? The password is associated with your identity and it's transmitted over the wire. It's something that authenticates you to, apps and business processes and all that. Whereas the PIN is just for that device. It's just to unlock the operating system on that device. So I tell customers, hey, you don't have to like think of this as this crazy, thing that you have to do. I have to go buy cameras. I have to buy fingerprint readers, all this other stuff. Just use a PIN. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee you your users are going to be super happy because, think about like if you had your phone and you had to enter in your Apple ID password every single time you had to, unlock your phone. That would be terrible. And that's what you're making your users do, is enter in their password every single time. Just implement Windows Hello for Business with a PIN. It's perfectly great.
And you do not need your same password policies, which, by the way, not even to get into, you don't really need password complexity policies outside of length, but you don't need all of that with a PIN because it's not something you can attempt remotely. You have to have the device, and all devices have anti-hammering implementations implemented at the silicon level. So it's not just implemented in software where software can be defeated. It's at a hardware level. It's at silicon. The TPM will lock out. The Apple Secure Enclave will lock out if you've made too many failed attempts at trying to bypass that PIN. So you do not need all these crazy complexity requirements. At Microsoft, 6-digit numeric never expires. That's our PIN policy. And one of the most attacked organizations in the world outside of the United States Department of Defense. And certainly, we, like everyone else, has had security incidents over the years, but none of them were pointed at, oh, well, it was lack of PIN. It was somebody broke in someone's Surface Book or whatever. It wasn't that, because it really is. You'd have to have all of those factors go right to be able to break into it. And ultimately, it goes back to that XKCD comic, which is the gift that keeps on giving. It's the old, we're going to try to crack his laptop. It's encrypted with 2048-bit RSA encryption, blast. And it's like, here's a $5 wrench. Just go hit him until he tells us the password. Like, if you're under duress, like, it's the human factor. It's not any technology that's going to save you.
One final thing too. Also, like, I get this question from customers all the time, like, oh, like, is this possible if they had the PIN and then they had the device? Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely possible. But as we should all know in security, once you have physical access to a device or a server or whatever, like, it's pretty much all bets are off. Like, if you have enough time and you have physical access, that's it. Like, there's really no security at that point for the most part. You could have everything encrypted, but then of course, like, they can still steal the encrypted data off the device or whatever. So it's just, anytime when you're thinking, like, I think like Cold War era, like people carrying around briefcases and all of a sudden they steal their device.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, come on, we're not doing that anymore.
Well,
everything.
It's just like, you need to get in the mindset of reduce what's really valuable on that device itself. The device is throwaway. Is the mindset you need to get into. Well, everything's stored in OneDrive. Everything is in the cloud. It's only cached locally if it's been recently used. It's Entra joined, so the identity is cloud-based. If they lose the device, we can cycle the identity effectively so that if that device comes back online, it can't sign in, blah, 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 blah. Make it so there's hardly anything interesting on it in the first place. And replacing it is a piece of cake because everything's in OneDrive and it's cloud joined and we do cloud management. We'll drop ship you a new PC, you sign in and away you go. Like, yeah, we lost the old one and it sucks and there may be some cached email data on it and who cares? Like, they can't do a whole lot with it. Stealing that PC does not help them gain lateral movement, does not help them get privilege escalation, all of those things. That's where we need to get to, is that any one given endpoint is not the end of the world. That ultimately, like, losing access to an endpoint shouldn't be a big deal to your security posture. And if it is, then you need to kind of rethink some things.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't be. It's an endpoint. So what? It should be an untrusted, barely trusted device that sits at the very peripheral of our security posture, not this like super trusted asset that sits on our internal network with always on VPN all the time and can talk to every single device in our network because we have a flat network. Like, that's problematic. Move away from that kind of thing.
All right. So let's move on to our next one. This one was also interesting. So I saw this article that said, what is the worst browser for privacy? Because not all web browsers are created equally.
Drum roll.
It's not much of a surprise, but Chrome is arguably the worst for privacy, right? Owned and operated by Google, automatically signs you into the browser if you sign into any of your Google applications like Gmail. And of course, like, Google is a company that their entire business model is based on profiting behind behavioral profiling. So everything you do in Chrome, it tracks, from searches to dwell times to links that you hover over. Like, every page is a data point. And so, interesting enough, it's still by far the most used browser. 2/3 of all desktop PC users use Chrome as their primary browser. You multiply that by 100 million some users, and you're basically looking at a surveillance system posing as a browser, which is kind of crazy.
Chrome is one of the smartest things Google ever created. I've been listening actually to the 3-part series on the Acquired podcast, which I've mentioned on the show in the past, but absolutely love. And they kind of walk through the whole story. Part one is the creation of Google, this great search engine, when compared to the contemporaries. It was a leap above them. It was so much better with the page rank technology and the speed and how clean the page was. It wasn't adorned with ads and banner ads and all this gross stuff. It was that clean, simple Google logo with a box. And you searched and you usually found what you were looking for better than anywhere else could do, faster than anyone else could do it. And the whole creation of the AdWords business model and everything that came along with it. And they got to the point when they're talking about the invention of Chrome and how Chrome was able to take everything they had created to that point and make it more valuable. Chrome, this is why, by the way, and I don't want to get on a big tangent here, the Department of Justice, the United States, recently had an antitrust proceedings against Google. And one of these ideas thrown around is, well, we could force them to sell off Chrome. We could force them to divest Chrome to someone else. The thing is, Chrome isn't valuable to anyone else. The only thing that makes Chrome valuable is because it's a conduit back to Google services that they monetize. And so Chrome, ultimately, the entire point of its existence is to spin that flywheel that generates more ads, more ad impressions, more behavioral profiling that helps Google make more money. Chrome is, and there's some really good innovative things they did with it. There's a reason they got everyone to switch to it. Microsoft, I didn't work at the time, neither did you, Andy, let's be fair, was asleep at the wheel, just gave up on developing Internet Explorer. Firefox was doing okay, but was resource intensive and heavy and kind of nerdy and wasn't easy to use. And Google came out with, hey, we're friendly Google, don't be evil, and here's our browser, and it does all these cool things that the other browsers don't do, tabbed browsing, and every tab's an individual process, and all these really innovative things they did that were attractive to end users. But ultimately, it's one of the smartest business decisions they ever made, and it's incredibly valuable to Google and Google alone.
Yeah. And, when you think about today's age, okay, so what if I were to use incognito mode, right? Like private browsing. Well, that doesn't.
I see people do that sometimes randomly. Well, they like do all their browsing in private. Why? What are you? Isn't that a terrible experience? Like, you're not signed into anything. Like, everything breaks.
Yeah, it is terrible. But even with Chrome, like it still doesn't prevent a lot of the privacy like leaking that would happen, right? Like
our audience knows that, or if you don't, Andy's about to tell you.
Yeah, it does not stop.
It doesn't help
websites from gathering your data, your IP address, your metrics. Chrome does stuff in the background as well. So when you like poke around and look at what Chrome does in private mode, it will continue to tie back browsing activity to your Google account unless you disallow it. So everything like bookmarks, IP ranges, autofills, that's all recorded. It doesn't mean that incognito mode is useless, but you definitely shouldn't rely on it for privacy. And you definitely should stay logged out of your Google account if you're using it. So, I mean, like, there's just all sorts of data that Google will collect and essentially build that digital fingerprint. And of course, they use it to get a profile of you, of personal information, health, social life, your buying behaviors, and then they sell that to brokers, right? And those brokers will then give you ads based on that. And that's why, like, when you say stuff, like your phone is listening and then all of a sudden you get ads for it, right? So all that's to say is, if you're using Chrome and you are concerned about privacy, there are better options today than there were, like back in the day when there was just Internet Explorer or even like the original Edge and Firefox. That's really the only three that were kind of around that most people used. The article suggests to use Brave. So it gives a couple of different options: Brave, Tor, Firefox. Brave is probably one of the better ones, in my opinion, when it comes to privacy focused. It's Chromium based, so it's based on literally the open source Chromium project. So websites will,
Compatibility's good.
yeah, what websites will render great in it, just like it would in Chrome. And it has, this is not like super intuitive, I would say, but I actually did set it up and started using it as my primary browser. And there's a thing that they do where, it's like my browsing activity, my profile is kind of like I should be able to monetize it for myself rather than give it to Google. So they have this way of like ad blocking built in, but they also allow you to like get paid for ads if you want to see them. You have to set up a crypto wallet and all this other stuff to do it. But I set it up, had to feed it a little bit of crypto in order to get it set up. But I was looking at it and I'm like, I'm getting paid, which is kind of cool just for browsing. And so it's been a pretty good one. Tor, obviously, if you want like total anonymity, Tor is the way to go. Probably not going to be allowed on like corporate devices, obviously. And it's not
We don't
good
allow
for,
it on ours at Microsoft. I found out the hard way. Ask me how I know.
definitely, yeah. And also like it's not like super good for just daily use, right? Because you're hopping through different Tor nodes and the way that Tor works.
It's going to act
So,
weird. Yeah.
but if you want total anonymity, I mean that's the way to go, right? Firefox is also still good. The controls are a little bit less like baked in. You can like configure it. So like if you're like a tech nerd, Firefox is still great for privacy. You have to tweak it a little bit to get things. Brave is better, I think, out of the box for just the normal muggle, as you will, like someone who's not like tech focused. They just want to download it. It works. And also Firefox doesn't render things in the same way. It's not based on the Chromium project. It is open source, but it's you have to get developers to make sure that their sites and stuff work, their content works in Firefox.
Who is the number one founder of the Mozilla Foundation?
I don't know.
Google. They get those fat checks from Google for it being the default search engine. So Firefox is mostly funded by Google.
Interesting.
Yep.
And finally, I think it would not be our duty if we didn't mention Edge. Edge, of course, I don't think it would be a privacy-focused browser.
We kind of tried to position it that as first. I just totally stumbled over my words. We tried to position it as that at first. We've kind of walked away from that. Microsoft has an advertising business too, much smaller than Google's, but certainly does make money selling ads and doing some of the same things Google does, to be completely fair. It is not a primary revenue stream for Microsoft. It's a smaller business. So you can't say, oh, well, Microsoft's entire business is profiling and selling ads, because it's not. But it is a business at Microsoft. I do think Edge is generally meant to be a little less like creepy and tracky and all that. That was especially early on the sales pitch around it. But to be fair, it is designed to be a conduit, like I mentioned Chrome is, to Microsoft Web Properties, to MSN, to Bing, to Copilot. And get you to use those and incentivize those behavior. You mentioned getting paid by the Brave folks for your usage. There is a Microsoft Rewards program where you can get paid indirectly. You can get points for your different Bing searches and interacting with different Microsoft properties. And you can exchange those for gift cards and other things of value. So it ultimately is a way of getting paid. It's not going to make anybody a ton of money, but it's something. And so that's something to consider too. It is Chromium based, so it's going to have the same level of compatibility you expect. It ships with every copy of Windows. So really, if you're just trying to lessen your dependence on kind of the Google and Amazon kind of monopolies in your world, it's a good way to get started. Total side note, by the way, I've been trying to reduce my reliance on Amazon and try to shop other channels when possible. And gosh, they make it hard. They're doing a new thing now. This blew my mind. Total side note, and I apologize, but I just thought of this. If anyone who's trying to like do less Google-y stuff, you're trying to do less Amazon stuff. I have a nugget ice machine, like the good ice they have at Chick-fil-A and Sonic and all that. And the one of the seals for the water reservoir broke, and I needed a replacement. And Amazon, of course, could get it to me same day between 5 to 10 p.m. That same day. I looked at it in the morning. They're like, yeah, we can get it to there, then. Now when they deliver it, they send you an email that tells you how long it was between when you ordered and when they delivered it. It said, you got your stuff in 11 hours and 19 minutes. I was like,
That's
Crazy.
insane.
It's insane. I mean, but now they're bragging like, and it's their competitive advantage. That's their moat, is they have this distribution system. I mean, we have warehouses here, we have delivery here. I'm sure you do in Madison as well. And so they can literally take it from warehouse, give it to a delivery person, have it at your door in under 12 hours. And now they're bragging about it in an email, which is just crazy. I get why it's so hard sometimes to extricate ourselves when they provide such differentiated value. I've heard people say, I can't get as good of search results from anybody but Google. I will say my experience doesn't bear that out. Yeah. I find web search is relatively commoditized today. And I think Bing actually does a really good job and presents a cleaner search results page that actually more clearly calls out what's advertising than Google does now, which is weird because that used to be kind of their claim to fame. Remember when the ads were actually in a yellow box way back in the day?
Yeah.
And slowly they look just like all the other results, and it's really hard to tell. Bing actually still, the ad results are differentiated in how they're laid out a little more clearly than the organic results. So I've actually come to really like that.
Yeah. And this article also had a couple of suggestions, which I do think are valid. So they have some suggestions for, say, using different browsers for different tasks, like separating work and personal, which, to like Adam's point of Edge, Microsoft Edge on the business side, like Microsoft Edge for Business, is very, very good when it comes to securing your data. There's like all of our security controls that are built into that. It can be extended to like Chrome and Brave, but you need an extension in order to do that, say for like DLP or for, I can't remember what the other one is, but there's a couple of extensions that will extend the security and purview stuff over to that. But then it's less controllable. Like you can't group policy or Intune, for example, all that stuff is natively built and you can control the extensions, the search engine, all of that. And then of course, Bing for Business, I don't know what it's called today. Is that what it's called?
We actually killed that.
Okay, of course we did. But like if you're using Bing on like a work profile, then it'll search your 65 stuff. So there's, in your search results, there's like shopping and, images or whatever. There's like a work one. And it's like, if you're typing in, I don't know, if I typed in Windows Hello for Business in my work profile for Microsoft, it'll find files and blogs and stuff that people have written internally that have shared. So it's nice that you can search your work stuff too. So I would say if you're using Microsoft Edge for like business is great. For personal stuff, that's a personal choice. It is probably less private concern compared to like a Brave search engine. And Adam, you mentioned search engines. We're talking about that. Pretty much, I would say they're pretty much the same today. Like you said, it's mainly, it's almost like EDR. Like they're all like roughly 99% the same if you compare them side to side. DuckDuckGo, Startpage, those are two ones that are more privacy focused. Brave actually has its own search engine built in by default, and it uses that one that's privacy focused. And like I think Google publishes like APIs or something like that. So like all of these search engines, they're pretty much all the same today. I was using Bing for a very, very long time.
DuckDuckGo uses the Bing index, by the way.
Yeah,
as does ChatGPT. So I mean, it's not like nothing uses Bing today either.
Right. They all kind of share the data, which is why they're all pretty much the same. But it's just depending on how much you want like saved and tracked and all of that, right? So, and they make it pretty easy. Like if you're like, oh, I've been using Chrome since 2007 and all my stuff is the same. Like I downloaded Brave and it's like, would you like to import your stuff? Yes, I would. Okay, boom. Imported all my stuff, bookmarks, search history, like passwords, like whatever you have stored, you can check off and import and you're off and running. Anyways, thought that was a good little article to walk through. Okay, so final thing that I wanted to talk about, again, privacy focused. If you haven't heard of this company called Flock Safety, I would kind of familiarize yourself with that company. I actually had never heard of them until I was on LinkedIn and I was just scrolling through the jobs as I normally do. And I saw this company advertising some cybersecurity jobs and it was Flock Safety. And I was like, oh, what is this? And I dug into the company a little bit and they're actually very known in like the kind of surveillance world, law enforcement world for their license plate recognition cameras. So they mount these cameras inside of cities so that they can see the license plates, right? It's not just law enforcement that use them, like DOT and whatever. what do you call it? The tolls, you know, you go through the tolls and stuff like that, the cameras.
Boothless tolling now, where you just keep driving.
Yep. And so like they have this whole network of footage because it doesn't just capture license plates. They're cameras. So like they also capture people, right? At intersections and stuff like that. And so Flock customers can not only search for license plates, obviously, but they can also search cameras for descriptors like find this person in a blue shirt and a cowboy hat, right? And at this time, at this place. And so it's obviously very useful for law enforcement if you're doing investigations. But there has been some concern from privacy advocates over the years with Flock. And what I saw to me that concerned me was now Amazon, as Adam, you're like trying to de-Amazon yourself. I think a lot of people
not doing a very good job of it.
But, there's this article that said Amazon announced a partnership with Flock. It was on October 17th, and they're now allowing about 5,000 local law enforcement agencies to request access to Ring camera footage via their surveillance platform called Flock Safety. So according to that announcement, Ring partnership will allow them to use the Flock software to send a direct post into the Ring Neighbors app with details about the investigation and request quote unquote voluntary assistance. The request has to include specific location, time frame of the incident, a unique investigation code, details about what is being investigated, and the users can look at the requests anonymously. According to Flock, any footage that a Ring customer chooses to submit will be securely packaged by Flock and shared directly with the requesting local public safety agency through their Flock OS or Flock Nova platform. So, it says it's voluntary, but obviously like there's a lot of privacy concerns with this. Our good friend Ron Wyden, the Democrat from Oregon, we talked about him a few weeks ago where he sent a scathing letter about Microsoft, but he also sent a letter to Flock CEO Garrett Langley. Respectfully, I like how like kind of dug into the cybersecurity this guy is.
We need more of that, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, some of these people are still series of tubes kind of people.
Yeah. So anyways, he sent a letter saying that ICE Homeland Security Investigations, the Secret Service, U.S. Navy's Criminal Investigation Service has also had access to the footage of Flock license plate cameras. And he wrote, and I quote, "I now believe that abuses of your product are not only likely, but inevitable, and that Flock is unable and uninterested in preventing them." Also, people from like the ACLU, like Jay Stanley, who's a senior policy analyst, he wrote that Flock is building this dangerous nationwide mass surveillance infrastructure, pointed to ICE using Flock's network of cameras and its efforts to build up a people lookup tool with the data brokers. Another policy analyst at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF. If you're familiar with privacy, I mean, like obviously these are all organizations that are focused on that. He wrote an email to Flock saying that it's a mass surveillance tool and that it's been increasingly used to spy on both immigrants and people exercising their First Amendment protected rights. And all of this reputation that Flock has built is really just through their own cameras, even before this Ring announcement. And so this collaboration, between Amazon and Flock, again, they say that it's voluntary, but there's obviously still a lot of reason to be concerned about people sending in doorbell and personal camera footage to law enforcement via this platform that has, again, been widely reported being used by federal agencies for deportation purposes, combined with the privacy issues that Ring also has faced over the years. It's really not hard to see why that this is kind of an unacceptable partnership between Amazon and law enforcement in general. It's like now all of a sudden you're giving consent to have your face every time you walk up to a Ring camera, a Ring doorbell or whatever to be sent over to law enforcement. So I will say personally, I have Ring outside of my house. So like all of my external cameras are Ring. I have a Ring doorbell. I have 2 Ring cameras, and this article has basically solidified that I'm going to replace them. I have to like find a useful replacement. Inside of my house, I use Unify. If you've heard of Ubiquity, that's well-known company, kind of a prosumer company. You can have an NVR, like a local video recorder. So I have hard drives that just locally record my inside house. I replaced all of my inside cameras and not uploading that to the cloud anymore. And my goal is to eventually replace the stuff outside as well with Unify and having a local network of cameras. But it makes it difficult mainly because a lot of their stuff is PoE powered and you have to run network cable, and kind of difficult in an existing house. So, but there are ways to do it. I've been looking at it, but my goal is to eventually replace all the stuff and not be using Ring anymore. They've had stuff over the years, and this is just kind of like the last straw, I guess.
Yeah, this is 0% surprising. Ring has long had a reputation of being really chummy with law enforcement and maybe not following due process to hand over video content in the past. And there's been other accusations towards them, to your point. Here's the funny part. So mine are all Google Nest. So I have the Google Nest doorbell facing outside. They just upgraded that all with Gemini support now. And it's a mixed bag because it's kind of nice because you used to get like motion detected and it was not very helpful. And now I will get a child walks into the room and sits on the bed, which is cool, but creepy at the same time. It's like, it's wild stuff. It is helpful though when, as opposed to person detected, like outside on my doorbell camera, it will say a person walks by walking a dog. Like, okay, I don't need to worry about that. Someone's walking their dog going down the street. All that said, this is how these things actually happen. When you talk about a mass surveillance network and all of these, they sound hysteric. They're not. It wouldn't be the government to build it. It would be a private company that the government is partnered with. And it starts off relatively innocuous. Oh, well, we're just scanning license plate cameras. Oh, well, we're just giving homeowners an option to opt in to share maybe some of their footage to help bring someone to justice, which we all want. Like, we want bad people who commit crimes to be held accountable for their actions. I think that's overall something we all pretty much agree with. Like, we don't agree on much these days. I think we all agree that's a good goal, but it's scary how you get there and how slippery that slope really is, where it's just one more thing like, oh, well, let's just, maybe we can bypass that step of having to be opt-in. Maybe we can just go, our AI can automatically crawl all of Ring customer footage and go find the relevant information, and it's geo-tagged, and we can automatically package that up and, really help bring more people to justice or whatever. And so now you've got cameras all over the place, all in a single platform between Flock and Ring. And I mean, again, it doesn't seem that far-fetched. It doesn't seem that far off. And it all starts with a noble goal. And that's the part of it too, is I think overall, this is all well-intentioned. It just has negative consequences. It's the same thing with the FBI versus Apple thing back in the day.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, it was the San Bernardino shooter where they tried to paint Apple as, well, Apple doesn't want to help bring this terrorist to justice. Apple doesn't want to help give closure to the families. And it wasn't that. It's that when you create a back door, it could be used by the Chinese. It could be used by the Russians. It can be used by people who are against Israel or for Israel or involved in Israel in some way. It can be used globally in negative ways and unforeseen ways that we haven't seen. Absolutely. Would it have been helpful maybe for Apple to break into that one phone and help bring, get that evidence, which, by the way, they broke in anyways, and there was no evidence on the phone. So it wouldn't have mattered, but you would have opened Pandora's box. And so that's how all this happens. That's how that slope is so slippery, is it all comes from well-intentioned people trying to do good, but not aware of the consequences. And that's what Wyden said. He said, I now believe abuses of your product are not only likely, but inevitable, and that Flock is unable and uninterested in preventing them. That's a little more, I'm not familiar with Flock's business model or anything else, but I do know there is a mindset that gets around when you're in, there's a name for this, but effectively the defense industrial base and everyone kind of surrounding providing technology to law enforcement or military. And again, purposes are good, but it becomes like a different worldview than I think a lot of us hold, and it influences your decision making as a result of it. And all of these things are good. You're sitting there describing them going, well, wouldn't it be helpful if you could look through all the Ring doorbells and find where the guy ran down the street who's a known, has done malicious things to children or something? Like, wouldn't you want to do that? Well, sure, it's opt-in. That's all. That all sounds okay, but how long is it opt-in? And how long before there's any activity here? How long before that changes? You don't know. And it's not hard to imagine. So I think the concerns are founded, and it's something we continue to monitor. And Ring in general has just had this kind of odd history. It very much appeals to the people on, like, what is that platform, Nextdoor, which I've never used, but like you get letters in the mail, all your neighbors are on Nextdoor. And it's basically just a place for people to say, there was a brown man in our neighborhood this week. The worst of humanity all brought together, and that there's the overlapping circles of people who like use Nextdoor and use Ring cameras are really heavily overlapped, I think, too. And so that was part of the motivation. Like, we're talking about getting rid of the tech giants. Like, well, I went with Google instead of Amazon here. Like, oh, way to go out on a limb, Adam. But weirdly enough, as much as Google loves collecting information about you, they don't like sharing it. That's Google's. That's their secret blend of herbs and spices. That's their Big Mac sauce. Like, they don't want to share that with anybody else. So the one thing Google is strangely buttoned up on is, yes, they may use a lot of your user data to monetize you, but they don't share it because that's their secret sauce. And so that's kind of the weird, like, perverse incentive about Google, is in a way they may, run their AI models on all your cameras if you opt into it, which I opted into, to be clear, by the way, with that Gemini stuff. But I do know they're not going to really go share it broadly. So everything is terrible. It's that whole enshittification thing that Cory Doctorow has been talking about for a while, and everyone's been getting into. It's just like,
it is tough.
We could go on about it all day. Like, you have to make trade-offs. You have to make decisions on, like, okay, well, I'm going to accept this and not accept that. And yeah, we're all trying to figure it out.
All right. Well, this was a fun episode to talk through.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. The links to the articles that we used for our discussion will be in the show notes, as well as our contact information if you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about in the future. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, as always, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJBrewer. See you at our next episode.